Just to show you where we're going with this, number one, it's just an overview of this file. Number two, we're talking about Windows 10. I'm using Windows 10 Pro. We have to make sure we know the drive letter on our thumb drive. And then we download the QBitTorrent app. And we use that app to download Kali Linux. Pronounced QBitTorrent. And then we download Rufus, and we use Rufus to write Kali to your thumb drive. Okay? So we download Kali ISO using the QBitTorrent app. And then after we download it, we check it. We run a checksum on the ISO file to make sure it's not corrupted. That's what all this is for. And it's not that hard. It's actually pretty easy. For this one to work, you got to have PowerShell and run PowerShell as an administrator. And we'll talk about that later. So after we download the file and check it to make sure it's not corrupt, we use Rufus to write the ISO to the thumb drive. And then when we reboot the computer, it boots to the thumb drive if our BIOS settings are correct. Okay? So I didn't want to skip over this. If you've never heard of BIOS or you've never messed around with it, I want to at least do a short video to show you how to check yours. And it's not that hard. All you do is go into your BIOS and change the boot order. It used to be when you boot your computer, the first thing it would do was check the floppy drive. Then it would check the CD. Then it would check the hard drive. These days, all that has changed. It goes right to the hard drive. But if you're old enough, you might remember that when you boot, when you restart your computer, you'll see a bunch of flashing lights on the front of your computer. Well, the operating system is checking your floppy drive, your CD player, to make sure they're there, make sure they work. But if you had a floppy in there, it would boot to the floppy. If you had a CD or a DVD, it'll try to boot to the CD or the DVD. So that's the boot order. We just need to set the boot order to boot to the USB first. Then if you don't have a USB plugged in, it'll boot to your regular Windows on your hard drive. So doing all this here will take like 30 seconds. It's not hard at all. But understanding it for our purposes, that's what we're doing here. We're trying to learn about this stuff. What is the boot order on modern home computers? So you can see here, it boots right to the hard drive. That's what they're saying here. Your system might be different. When you restart your computer, you see a black screen. If you press one of the keys, the F keys, it'll boot into the BIOS. Every company is different, so you have to know which key to press. On Dell, what key do I press to get into the BIOS? And it says F2. That's the function keys at the top of the keyboard. F for function. It says restart. Tap F2 repeatedly when the Dell logo appears. It says you might want to try F12. Okay, so we'll go over more of that when we get there. Just wanted to give you a general idea. Use Rufus to create the bootable thumb drive. And then restart your computer, boot to the thumb drive. And it runs Kali in your RAM. It doesn't go to the hard drive. Hopefully you know what I mean by hard drive and RAM. So it starts it up off the thumb drive and goes into RAM. And then from there, it's like we're just learning Kali, learning Linux. We'll start with the Kali desktop. Kind of looks like a Windows desktop. It's got menus and desktop you can put folders on and things like that. Then we'll get into the command line. And, the command line is big for what we want to study. But it's always best to use the GUI, to use the buttons and the drop downs for an app, if you can, because it limits your choices so you don't make a mistake. If you do everything on the command line, typing in words, typing in letters, typing in numbers, if you type something wrong, it won't work. In general, it's best to use the GUI. Command line more powerful, but it's got to be perfect. You can't be close. So we'll get into the basics of running the command line, running some basic Linux commands. And then I want to do the book that I learned from. It's called Unix Made Easy. And we won't run every command that's in the book. So if you can get a copy of this book, that will help. That's the book that I learned from, and that's the book that I taught from. The guy that I took all of my computer classes from. That's the book that he recommended. That's the book he used in class, and he'd been doing it for years. So you can get a new one for $16. Get a used one for $11. And I bet if you hit some bookstores, some older bookstores, I wouldn't be surprised if you see that on the shelf. In case you can't get the book, I'll try to go over most of the commands or some of the commands in the chapter. But it would be best if you had your own book and you just follow along. The chapters aren't hard. There's a lot of white space, and it walks you through it step by step. Type in this command, and things like that. Really good tutorial book. And then after we get the basics down, Then we'll get into more of the server end. Here, using the book, we're mainly just talking about being a user. There's some chapters that show you server stuff, but it doesn't get into things like installing a web server, creating user accounts, using a database, setting up a firewall, setting up a IDS, intrusion detection system. There is a chapter on writing scripts. That's actually a pretty good chapter. Okay? So that's where we're going with. Next video, we'll start with number 1. Okay, see ya. Bye.